What's up, psychedelic investors? So there was a lot of big news that happened in the world of psychedelic medicine investing this week. And with that in mind, we decided to bring back an old favorite segment. This week in psychedelic stocks. So today we're going to be talking about some news with Cybin, with Numinus, with MindMed, and more. We got 5 of the biggest news stories of the past week to give to y'all. So if you do enjoy this video, make sure you boost up the algorithm with your like, subscribe, and comment down below. With that being said, let's hop into the video. So our first big news story of the week revolves around Cybin, and that is because they have acquired Entheon Biomedical's Phase 1 DMT clinical trial. So, like I said, this was a Phase 1 clinical trial. It was happening in the Netherlands, and it was partaking in 50, I don't know if that's the right word, it was happening in 50 healthy individuals that were using nicotine. So this was actually the largest ever Phase 1 safety trial for DMT. However, Small Pharma does have a Phase 2 clinical trial researching DMT already. So, Cybin gave Entheon Biomedical a cool, nice, crisp $1 million, albeit 1 million Canadian, for the rights to this trial, and they also will give them up to an additional $480,000 Canadian for consulting services regarding this clinical trial. So, let's look at why Entheon would want to do this and why Cybin would want to do this. Let's start with Cybin. So Cybin says that the purchase of this clinical trial will help them accelerate the development process of CYB004. Now, y'all are probably already aware that CYB004 is Cybin's next generation DMT. So they say they've improved upon DMT in a handful of ways, but the most obvious one is they say they have prolonged the duration of effect of DMT. So they've got this next generation DMT, and they say that by acquiring this Phase 1 safety test of DMT, they will be able to accelerate the development process of CYB004, and in fact, they say they will be able to speed up the process by a whopping 9 months. So that is very good news for Cybin, of course. They say that they will be gaining access to, quote, essential safety and dosing optimization data. This is also going to be able to replace their pilot study that they had planned to start this year. Some of y'all might know about this. They plan to pilot study, just a small study with CYB004, but that is now being replaced by this purchased Phase 1 safety trial from Entheon Biomedical. So, we can see why Cybin decided to do it, but how about Entheon Biomedical? Well, as a reminder, Entheon has 3 main pillars to their business. First is the halogen side, and what halogen essentially is it is a test which they say can measure whether or not a person is susceptible to having a bad trip, if they are genetically predisposed to having a bad trip. They also have their Entheon IQ division, which essentially analyzes patient data to create algorithms. And then, of course, they have their DMT treatment program. And the flagship part of their DMT treatment program was, of course, this Phase 1 trial, which they just sold or in the process of selling to Cybin. So, given the fact that they are selling this, we can make a reasonable assumption that they are winding down the DMT portion of their business to focus more or less exclusively on halogen and then also Entheon IQ. They're probably doing this because running clinical trials, man expensive, and they didn't have too much money in the bank, so they're probably going to be able to use this 1.5 or close to 1.5 million Canadian dollars. So this deal is expected to close within 30 days, and under the terms of the agreement, the two parties will, quote, enter into a data license agreement, and this is going to allow Entheon's IQ division to access certain data from this clinical trial to help support their IQ division. So, long story short, this is a win-win for both companies. Cybin, they're going to get the rights to a DMT trial, speed up CYB004. Entheon, they're going to get some much-needed capital and be able to refocus their efforts on halogen and then also Entheon IQ. Moving on to our second big story of the day, or of the week, excuse me. It is, of course, Numinus and Novamind's merger, or rather Numinus's acquisition of Novamind. So you all remember that we made a video on this not too long ago when the news first broke that Numinus was attempting, or Numinus was going to acquire Novamind, and we said at the time that it wasn't quite a done deal yet. They still needed to have shareholder approval from both companies. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has now happened, with the shareholders of both Numinus and Novamind voting overwhelmingly to approve this transaction. So, how overwhelmingly? Well, 98.5% of Novamind shares and shareholders voted in favor of this acquisition. But not to be outdone, Numinus had 98.71% of their shareholders approve this transaction. So this is basically a done deal. The two companies said that they expect that this transaction will go through on or around June 10th, and well, we're June 10th today, at least at the time of filming. We haven't seen a press release on it yet, so perhaps it will come later today before you see this video, or perhaps it will come over the weekend or on Monday, but the deal does look like it is more or less done. Once it is done, the new Numinus is going to have 13 wellness clinics across North America, so that's where they treat patients with depression, with ketamine, and then maybe in the future, perhaps MDMA or psilocybin. They're going to have a research site for clinical research sites and also a dedicated psychedelics research laboratory. Most impressively, however, Numinus, once this deal goes through, is going to have a whopping $10 million in revenue right off the bat. This is probably going to set them up to be the psychedelic medicines company with the most revenue. However, it is a big but, they're still going to be in the red. They're not going to be profitable. They're going to have $10 million in revenue, but they're still going to be massively in the red, and it's still going to take years for them to become profitable, so just keep that in mind. Yes, having $10 million in revenue is fantastic, but it is not the be-all, end-all. Moving on. Next, we're going to be looking at MindMed, who, unfortunately, we've got a fancy teeny-weeny bit of bad news for y'all today. MindMed has been dropped from the Russell 3000 index. Now, longtime listeners of this video, of this channel, back when it was called The Psychedelic Investor instead of Psych Business, will remember that we did a video on MindMed's inclusion into the Russell 3000 index when it happened last June, 1 year ago. So, last June, let's just rewind our brains here for a second, guys. What was happening when it comes to MindMed? Well, their stock was skyrocketing. It was party time. We were all preparing for boat parties. You remember the hype. Their market cap surpassed $1 billion, So they got added to all sorts of different indexes that passively track the American and international market. One such index was the FTSE Russell 3000 index, which, very simply, just includes the 3,000 largest companies that exist publicly in the United States. And as MindMed, market cap north of $1 billion last June, they were one of the largest 3,000 companies in the world, or in the United States, rather. So they got added to that index. However, the FTSE Russell 3000, they readjust once per year, I guess in every June, and fast forwarding to this June, well, what's happened to the stock price in the last year? Anybody know? It's dropped by 75%. Unfortunately, they now have a market cap of only around $375 million, at least last time I looked at it. And with that market cap of less than $500 million, they are no longer in the top 3,000 largest companies in the United States, and therefore, they have been removed from the Russell 3000 index. Now, I want to be extremely clear. This is not a commentary on the business development of the company, of their execution, of their leadership, or of their future prospects. Just like it wasn't a commentary on it when they got added to the index. This is just simple arithmetic. MindMed is no longer one of the 3,000 largest companies in the United States, therefore, it's no longer in the Russell 3000 index. Moving on, we've got a really neat story from two smaller companies that exist in the field. We've actually talked about them both on the program before. So, Optimi Health has finalized a partnership and psilocybin supply agreement with Atma Journey Centers. So, this is a exploratory psilocybin agreement that Optimi has announced with Atma, and Atma, by the way, is a private company. Now, under the terms of the agreement, Optimi, who, by the way, is a company that's primarily focused on the research, production, and sale of naturally grown psilocybin, the naturally grown is the most important part there, they are going to be providing Atma, who again is a private company. They are primarily focused on therapist training, education, communication, and business development. So, Optimi providing Atma with psilocybin. This supply agreement will, quote, supply psilocybin products to Atma for future therapist initiatives and supply agreements, and will give Optimi an opportunity to refine approaches and improve efficiencies around the commercial distribution and clinical applications of psilocybin in anticipation of a more robust demand. So this seems like very good news for both companies. Optimi wants to sell their psilocybin, and Atma needs psilocybin to train their therapists. So this is a great deal for both companies. Just as a little aside, I've actually talked to David Harder a couple times, the CEO or co-CEO of Atma Journey Centers. You can find those interviews on the channel. I also had the opportunity to interview the CEO of Optimi. That has not been released yet, but keep an eye out for it. It will be coming soon. Finally, our last story today is revolving another small company called Pharmathor, but don't leave yet because this is a really interesting study that they're releasing. So, long story short, Pharmathor has announced the results, or at least the top line positive results, of a study for something called Ketabet for depression. So, long story short, Pharmathor had a small observational study which was attempting to reduce the negative side effects that come with ketamine treatment for depression. Now, I know sometimes we like to think that these treatments are perfect the way they are and there's absolutely no negative side effects. But anybody who has done ketamine, even if it worked to treat their depression in a clinical setting, can probably tell you that yes, there are some negative side effects. So what Pharmathor wanted to do here to try to treat the negative side effects or lessen the negative side effects of ketamine to treat depression. So they had 10 patients that they pre-treated with a drug called betaine-butane. So betaine-butane is a drug which is non-psychedelic. It occurs naturally in the body. Some people even take it as a supplement, and it is used to treat a condition called, and warning, I'm going to say the name of this condition wrong, homocystinuria. Not going to try to say it again. Maybe we'll put it up on the screen. But long story short, Pharmathor calls the combination of these two drugs, so the ketamine and the betaine-butane, the combination of these two, Ketabet. Easy enough to see why. So the main side effects of ketamine, at least in the short term, that Pharmathor was attempting to lessen were depersonalization, derealization, and amnesia. And pretty amazingly, according to Pharmathor, there was, quote, a reduction in mean of 66% at 40 minutes following ketamine infusion initiation was seen for each of these measures in the study. So depersonalization, derealization, and amnesia decreased by 66% on average. That's honestly some pretty great results that they got. And furthermore, the combination was determined to be safe and there were no serious adverse events. The combination was well tolerated. And Pharmathor says they're going to release the full results in the second half of 22, which, by the way, guys, is somehow, I don't know how, in like 3 weeks. I'm not saying they're going to release it in 3 weeks, just sometime in the second half of the year, but I don't know. Somehow we are in the second half of 2022 in like 3 weeks. Somebody let me know down in the comments how the heck that is possible. I got sidetracked there a little bit. Getting back to the point, the results of this clinical trial are going to help inform Pharmathor when they do their phase 2A clinical trial in Ketabet, which again, combining ketamine with a pre-treatment of betaine-butane. Guys, I promised I tried to learn how to say that word. I practiced it for like 20 minutes. I'm still saying it wrong, so I'm sorry. But anyhow, guys, those are the 5 stories of the week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. I want to see the people that made it to the end of the video the most, so give me a little fire emoji if you stuck around to the end. That's all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm James. This is Psych Biz. We will see you next time.